I'm on.
Is it on? Okay. Start with a prayer,
Oops.
chant,
Wait a
and
minute. Just a second, let me do
a
this.
little meditation.
Hello, turn me off. No, I got it. This thing keeps bouncing off my curly hair.
Anybody got some duct tape?
Practically need that.
Okay.
Hang on just a second.
Oh, where's Dakshina? We need Dakshina. It's all right. She'll come. Okay, you ready?
Why don't we start with a chant so people can keep flowing in? There's still people downstairs.
Okay.
Why, O mind, wondrous thou go in thy inner home? Why, O mind, wondrous thou go in thy inner home? On the left, Ida, on the right, Pingala, on the left, Ida, on the right, Pingala. In the middle, the taintless Ashuna sees her with all thy might. In the middle, the taintless Ashuna sees her with all thy might. Kundalini power in the subtle form liveth unconscious in the coccyx region. Kundalini power in the subtle form liveth unconscious in the coccyx region. Guru given power by Kriya Yoga wake her with all thy might. Guru given power by Kriya Yoga wake her with all thy might. Wondrous thou go in thy inner home. Why, O mind, wondrous thou go in thy inner home. On the left, Ida, on the right, Pingala. On the left, Ida, on the right, Pingala. In the middle, the taintless Ashuna sees her with all thy might. In the middle, the taintless Ashuna sees her with all thy might. Kundalini power in the subtle form liveth unconscious in the coccyx region. Kundalini power in the subtle form liveth unconscious in the coccyx region. Guru given power by Kriya Yoga wake her with all thy might. Guru given power by Kriya Yoga wake her with all thy might. Wake her with all thy might.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Friend, Beloved God,
Friend, Beloved God,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashai,
Lahiri Mahashai,
Swami Sri Yukteswar,
Swami Sri Yukteswar,
Beloved Guru,
Beloved Guru,
Paramahansa Yogananda Ji,
Paramahamsa Yogananda Ji,
and Sri Patanjali.
and Sri Patanjali.
We invoke your wisdom,
We invoke your wisdom,
blossoming like the lotus flower
blossoming like the lotus flower
in our hearts.
in our hearts.
Om.
Om.
Peace.
Peace.
Amen.
Amen.
Let's meditate a few minutes. I'd like to do a guided Hong Sau meditation on the 4 aspects of consciousness. But let's first sit upright. Chest up and shoulders down. Palms upward on the thighs. Behind closed eyes now, lift your gaze. Before we begin, hold it steady there, not with tension or merely willpower, but with relaxation and interest. Gaze there steadily. Let any emotion there begin to subside as you open your heart. Feel the heartbeat begin to slow. Feel the entire body as one. To energize the body, let's do a double breath together. Inhale intense. Vibrate with joy. Exhale. Now relax and feel the body once again. Not just as an object, but as the temple of the Spirit. Feel prana, life force, coursing through your veins in every cell with the joy of God. I am a child of the infinite. Now take a deep breath, inhale. Throw the breath out. Let's begin natural breathing as we do in Hong Sau. We'll do the Hong Sau technique with the silent mantra, but we'll do it in a different form. We'll begin at the heart now. Center your consciousness there in the heart, the seat of citta, feeling. And for a few breaths, let the breath flow in and out through the heart center, the heart chakra. As the breath comes in naturally and you mentally chant Hong, feel deep calmness and joy entering your heart. And as the breath goes out and you chant Sau, release all nervousness, tension and stress, all hurts and sorrows. Let's do this for a number of breaths in silence now. Now let's shift our attention up to the medulla, the seat of ego, Ankar. Again, following the breath with the mantra. As the breath comes in, feel prana entering in through the medulla, bringing to you an expansion of consciousness, And when the breath goes out and you silently chant Sa, feel it going back out the medulla, dissolving all sense of littleness and ego. Let's do this for a few breaths. Now let's move to the Christ center, the seat of Buddhi, and do the same in reverse. With each incoming breath, feel enlightenment entering the brain, the mind, enlightening the mind with an expansion of awareness. And with each outgoing breath and Sa, dissolve restless thoughts back into spirit. Just a few breaths now. Now let's take a breath. Inhale. Through the breath out again. Let's sit in the silence for just a brief time. But now call your attention to the top of the head, the Sahasrara, the crown chakra, the seat of Mon in its highest elevation, highest awareness of observer. You might want to visualize the Guru sitting on your head, or just feel energy there, entering the watchful state of peace. Be still. Rise above it all into pure peace and consciousness, just for a few breaths, a few moments. Let's close with this affirmation on calmness. Though the winds of difficulties howl around me, I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms. Though the winds of difficulties howl around me,
though the winds of difficulties howl around me,
I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms.
I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms.
Though the winds of difficulties howl around me,
though the winds of difficulties howl around me,
I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms. Now mentally only, though the winds of difficulties howl around me, I stand forever calmly at the center of life's storms. Now feel the truth of that in every cell of the body in a moment of silence. Om Shanti. Amen.
Well, thank you, brave souls, for coming back to Patanjali. As we emailed all of you about our experimentation with the format, I hope you'll bear with us tonight as we do experiment based on, sort of general feedback that we got, that perhaps for this particular book and this material, it'd be better if we stay in a large group but have the opportunity to discuss questions people have and that kind of thing. So before we start, I wanted to just give a few thoughts from last week and sort of the general feeling that I came away with from what we had read so far, which is that, in a way, the Bhagavad Gita commentaries by Master that Swamiji put together, maybe 10 years ago now, to me that's the best book that Swamiji ever wrote. I feel that it changed my life. And my life had already been changed many times before that, but in a very profound way, because suddenly I could really viscerally see everything in life reflected, the inner life reflects the outer life, everything in life coming back to our spine, to the inner life in the Gita. And in a sense it's the bhakti, but also the philosophical underpinning of our path. And Patanjali is the how. It's the Yoga Sutras, the Yoga, Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta. Yoga is the how. So Patanjali gives us, in a sense, the science of it. And for those of us who were more inclined towards the languages and the arts and not the sciences. Whoops. This thing keeps popping up. It can be, a little harder to wrap our minds around, and those of us who swim in the sciences, it's a piece of cake. And so it's very difficult to gain an understanding of Patanjali unless we actually practice, unless we actually sit with it. And so that's part of the reason why tonight we wanted to experiment with this approach where we read the sutra, we meditate on it, and really try to absorb the essence of it in a very brief meditation, because we don't have a ton of time, but it's still meditation. Try to go deep fast. And then we just offer some thoughts on it before going on to the next one. And we won't be able to cover all of them. Moreover, Riemann and I wanted to say that The meat of the book, as he said last week, is in the first two padas. And then the last two padas are more ethereal, you might say. And so we'd like to stay with the homework reading assignment so that we actually end up completely reading the book throughout this course. But we're going to take the prerogative to perhaps move a little bit more slowly through the first two padas, and then go a little bit more quickly in the last two. So you'll always be ahead in the readings, you'll never be behind, but we may still be covering some sections that you've read in prior weeks. In any given week, we're just going to try to cover the material as best we can and give emphasis where it's needed. So one other thought I wanted to offer is something I heard Swamiji say at a Kriya initiation, which I found very helpful in trying to understand yoga and trying to understand Patanjali. Gave it in the context of Kriya, but it really works for all the meditation techniques because our gurus tell us, different ones of our gurus have said with different ones of our meditation techniques, we can find God in this lifetime if we practice that technique perfectly. So they're all intended to bring us freedom. And he talked about the fact that the technique is, the yoga, is like carrying an umbrella in the rain. Welcome to Seattle. The vritti, the karma, is still there, but the rain is coming down, but because we're carrying an umbrella, it doesn't get us wet. And so the meaning of that being that the karmas are still residing in our spine, as our teachings tell us, but by practicing yoga, they become purified. And so we're no longer affected by them in the same way. They're neutralized. Yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodha. So they become neutralized, and we can become free through yoga, but not still have the final freedom, which Riemann is going to talk about shortly, at which point we get to sort of, through vision and through meditation, through, vision is the way Swamiji put it, we get to reflect back to all those karmas that we had in the past that were neutralized and recognize that God was the doer and this little ego was not the doer. And we have to go through all of that process before we can become finally free. So they're still with us, but they're neutralized. They no longer force us to act compulsively. And I found that explanation of the umbrella very, very helpful in trying to understand this deep teaching. So we're going to start with stanza 2. If Murli would come up, we've invited him this week to be our reader.
I hope he gets the pronunciation right.
If it's English, it's a little bit hard. The first one is stanza 2. Let's sit up straight as if preparing for a meditation. I'll read the stanza and then we'll meditate on it for a little.
Make sure you're all
Okay. This is the second stanza, 1-2. Yoga is the neutralization of the vortices of feeling.
Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirod. I don't know who was supposed to end this. We didn't say. So, did I say it okay?
Wonderfully.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Now, last week, I launched on a tangent for the fact that I thought that I didn't want to cover territory. I felt that was perhaps too commonplace for many. But we discovered in comparing our notes from discussion group leaders that this stanza, not only is it the most important stanza in the entire book, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirod, but it is well worth exploring. There it is. Okay. And so most of the words we know very simply, but there are two key words. Yogas, I don't know why it's plural, but anyway, yoga, oneness, of course, transcendence, chitta, we'll explore. Vritti, those are the two key words. Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirod. No, is the verb, the pacifying, the calming, the dissolving, and neutralizing aspects. So the two key words that Swami explores in the sutras are vritti and chitta. And I wanted to begin with chitta because it takes us on a horsey ride. Those who knows your equine aspects. But let's look at the words. Chitta, commonly described as likes and dislikes, attachments, desires, and so forth. Vritti, whirlpool, I'll just stick with that for now. Think of a little tiny tornado-shaped thing. And then I mentioned Nirod. So let's move into that. Chitta becomes, as you all know from lots of things, one of the four aspects of consciousness. And it is variously interpreted, those of you who have studied the holy science, but for our purposes, for Patanjali's purposes here, the chitta is referring to put it more crudely, emotions and the sort of electrical charge of feeling that we attach to our thoughts, our memories, our ideas, our desires, and so forth. And so it's primordial feeling in the personal sense, in the sense of the ego and the body. Vritti then represents that commitment of our life's energy, our life force, which, as we have been told by the yogis, reside all along the spine, the subtle astral spine, according to the relative level of consciousness, heaviness, materialisticness, if that's a word, the nature of it. Harmony, beauty, artistry and so forth would be in the higher centers, the heart and so forth. Desire for money and possessions and position would be in the lower chakras. These vrittis, Swami talks about waves versus vrittis because so often this is translated as neutralization of the waves of feeling and so forth. But he says that waves doesn't quite give the imagery. The commitment of energy in the vrittis is a little easier to see all along the spine. But chitta is only one aspect of our consciousness incarnate. And the four aspects are, as you all know, mon, buddhi, chitta, and ahankar. Ahankar is ego, chitta is feeling, as we've said. Mon is the sense mind, I'll come back to, and buddhi is, we call it the intellect, but it's much more. Each of these aspects of consciousness are like aspects of a diamond. You can't really separate them, but with introspection, it's helpful to make the distinctions, and the distinctions appear, you might say, in introspective states of consciousness. But it's important that we not pull these things together too intellectually. It's there in order to help us understand what's going on with us and which of these is the one that causes trouble. And in the example of the horse, we're told that the mind is like a mirror on the wall, perhaps opposite a window, and outside the window is a pasture, and sure enough, there's a horse out there in the pasture. And the mind, therefore, connected to the reins of the chariot of the body, takes in the sense impressions coming in through the optical nerves, we'll just say, keep it simple. And so the mirror is that aspect, that capacity of consciousness to reflect the input of the five senses. Not to do anything with it, but it's our ability, it's our lifeline, it's our cell phone signal that allows us to make connections with objects in the field of vision and olfactory, taste, touch, and so forth. The vision is just the easier one to talk about. And so we're able to connect with the world around us and objects in the field of senses through the neural capacity of the mind. It connects us. Oh, is that what's going on? Okay. And so, like if your hearing goes bad or your vision goes bad, then the capacity of the mind is obfuscated. It's stirred up. And so you can't hear what somebody said. You can't see who you're talking to, and so forth. And so that's an incapacity. That's a disability that makes our ability to contact the world very difficult. I didn't hear what you said. I can't see whether that's a snake or a rope in the dusk, and so forth. So having bodily health and strong sense organs and so forth, and a good mind is necessary in order to function in the world with even wisdom. But otherwise, it's simply a function. The buddhi, the mind being located here, and we'll come back to that, buddhi, located here in the prefrontal lobes, is that ability to make the discernment, to identify in the mirror of the mind that, in fact, that is a horse. And so it makes the classifications. Ahankar, located in the medulla, says, well, that's my horse, as opposed to Stephanie's horse, which might also be out there in the pasture. But as he says, and as we know from our study of the teachings, it's the chitta in the heart that gets excited and says, I love my horse. And that, of course, is where the trouble begins. We're told that, and it makes perfect logical sense, that even a master, an avatar, has ego and has these aspects of consciousness. Because in order to function in the body, you have to be able to know which door to go into, which car is yours, and all these kinds of things. It's the chitta, the like and dislike, the attachment, the self-identification, and this is my wife, not your wife, all this kind of thing, is that limits our consciousness and gets identified with specific things. And that's where our troubles begin. Now, as to the location in the body, the only one that our discussion groups seem to identify, and the one that Swami talks about too, is not as obvious to us yogis, is of course the mon at the top of the head, because we here in yoga associate the sahasrara, the crown chakra, as the highest center, and mon being somewhat, let's face it, rather pedestrian in its functionality, we think, well, that's a very odd juxtaposition. We can relate to ego and to some degree. We can certainly relate to the highest degree with the heart center. And because as meditators and Raja Yogis and Kriyabans, we don't have any problem concentrating here and understanding even what Western science tells us about the high functioning aspects of the prefrontal lobes. But why mind here? Swami never really says specifically. So far as I know, Master certainly never made any reference to giving any explanation to this, which is the least obvious. But in our discussion group, what came out is the fact that I'll use the example given in the Mahabharata, where Krishna, as Guru, says, I'll guide your chariot, but I won't be involved with the war. I'll give you guidance. And the soul, we're told, residing in the crown, is uninvolved, is untouched, is eternal, is deathless, as Krishna says in the Gita. And therefore the soul is ever watchful. Being raised as I was, I think of it almost like the guardian angel. We can ask for guidance and we can get guidance, but otherwise, it's your problem. Otherwise, you have to make the call. You have to take the action. And so, in a very high level, Mon, which is also, neutral, as it were, takes in is an observer in a sense, in a very low sense, admittedly, but that's the only sense that we could make of the positioning of Mon with the crown chakra. Just offer that as a possibility. But that did come up. Let's move to the next slide. Now, let me just check. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Yes. Now, vrittis we're going to come back to, but because we're going to be skipping some of the stanzas, I'm going to hold that. What's the next slide? Is it Padma's slide? Yes, it is. And so we're going to come back to that slide a little bit, because what I want to talk to a little bit later, so Padma can get into the stanza 2, is a lot of the feedback that we had was about the vrittis and confusion about the vrittis. But I'm going to save that. So let's move on to stanza 3.
Then, spiritually free, the sage abides tranquilly in his inner self. Then, spiritually free, the sage abides tranquilly in his inner self. Let's meditate.
Pretty nice to imagine calmly abiding, free in our inner self. Of course, the tranquility here that it describes is the calmness, one of the aspects of God, which is therefore one of the aspects of a spiritually free soul. And I want to touch a little bit on that subject of calmness, which is how Swamiji treats this particular sutra. Calmness is all about ego transcendence. When our likes and dislikes, when those vrittis are stilled, become calm. We've transcended our little ego self and connected with the vastness of our cosmic soul, cosmic consciousness, I should say. And so a few weeks ago, I remember talking at a Sunday service about the book Sadhu Beware, and how in that little book he treats so powerfully the subject of ego transcendence with, I think it's 33 ways to transcend ego, or things to look for in transcending ego. And one of those is, he mentions not praying for oneself, not asking anything for oneself. If others want to pray for us, then that's wonderful, but it's not something we're seeking to do for ourselves. And there's this interesting story, some of you may remember, about the woman saint in India who was a guru and who had many disciples and was quite advanced spiritually and had the ability to heal others. Her prayers would help heal others, truly, from serious illness. And so at a certain point, her father became ill, and her disciple said, "Please pray for your father." And she said she could not pray for her father. And they said, "But why not? That's selfish. You must pray for him. He's your very own father." And she said, "I cannot pray for my father." And they kept begging her to pray for the father. And finally she said, "Okay." And she prayed for the father. And he was healed. And then a year or two later, the father fell in love with another woman, left the mother, became an alcoholic, and his life just went from bad to worse. You see, it wasn't his karma to be healed, and it hadn't been the right thing for her to ask. And that's why Master says in our healing prayers to always pray for God's will rather than be too specific about what it is that we're trying to do, even when it's for others. But when it's for ourselves, it's just one more way to embellish the ego rather than refine or free ourselves from the ego. Just as one example, I know in the years working with Swamiji in his special projects, departments, and publishing, there'd be times when there were struggles and issues going on among people, and he'd ask me sometimes, "What's happening? How are things," not specifically, but "How are things going?" And I would be tempted to, tell him at least a little bit, give him a hint about what was going on, and he'd always sort of change the subject. And it's as if I realized later with hindsight, I was involved and I was too close to it. And so it was his way of helping me not add to my own ego, in a sense, to be able to transcend it. Because years later, when I was living up here and Crystal Clarity went through some struggles, and he asked me to actually go down there and look into the department and see what was happening and let him know, give him my impressions of what was going on that was causing the problems. And so I did that, and on that occasion, he wanted to hear the feedback, because, you see, I wasn't directly involved. There could be no hint of subjectivity, which there always is when we're directly involved in something. And it's not that he wanted to hear the most objective thing, it's that he was trying to help me or us, because he did this, I saw him do this in many different contexts. When you're in the situation, you're not the one who can give the most objective report on that situation. And it's more helpful to be detached from it and not directly involved, and then you can see things more clearly, and moreover, you're not adding to your own, well, this is my opinion, this is what's going on. And so in these ways, we learn to reflect and introspect. One of my friends at the village was just telling me that recently there was an issue where they were trying to decide to build more houses right in the area where they have lovely trees around, forest around their home. And so there was a meeting, and he went to the meeting, and he wanted to voice his concerns and preferences. And the person running the meeting, in charge of this whole decision, had a home next to him. So his home was going to be just as much affected by this. And in the whole meeting, this person who was in charge never said a word. Privately, my friend knew that this person had an opinion, but he had the wisdom not to express it because he was too involved himself. He had some self-interest that could be, shall we say, embellished upon, that could grow his ego and self-interest. And so he was able to be very objective and not say a word. So this practice of ego transcendence takes self-discipline, is what I'm trying to say. And calmness is tested in adversity. As St. Francis says with his example of what the definition is of perfect joy, essentially without going into the story, what he is saying is perfect joy is ego transcendence. It's the ability to be in the worst of all circumstances, to be beaten up and betrayed and abused, and still be able to have joy and love in our hearts and the ability to stay calm. Calmness in adversity is something that we have to learn to practice bit by bit by, as Swami would give in his examples, by going to the dentist and not taking the Novocaine. In his case, that was his method. It doesn't have to be your method, but find a method, to be cold in the room and let it be. To not like the way that picture is crooked on the wall, and it's got to be changed. I mean, just to pull back from our own preferences and do so consciously, and far from meaning then we become spineless. What happens is we become stronger and stronger in the ability to be calm, as it says in the teachings, to be able to stand amidst clashing worlds.
Next one is 1-8. Wrong understanding is mistaking the true nature of that which is being considered. Wrong understanding is mistaking the true nature of that which is being considered.
Let's consider then this calmness and right or wrong understanding. Yogas chitta vritti nirod. Does it mean we're going to end up being indifferent? I've had many students in classes when we come to this stanza, and Raja especially, say, well, I'm a passionate person. Do I, if I'm going to calm my vrittis, am I going to be a dullard? Am I going to be indifferent to other people? It's really the same question, or a variation of the question, famous question that Arjuna asks very in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. If I kill my lower nature, so to speak, am I going to be dull? Is it going to be is it boring to be calm? Well, this is what the ego and the subconscious offers to us, because it's, whether you see it in terms of sugar or other stimulants, whether you see it in terms of, travel, possessions, and other exciting things, excitement, in one form or another, is what most people live for. Okay? What you find in the physical body, even, as well as in the maturing ego, even, forget the soul for a moment, you find that not only does the body's capacity to handle excitement begin to decrease over time, it can actually become painful. That which you enjoyed avidly through the five senses, over time, many people, and especially if they overdo it over decades, it reverses by the law of duality and becomes an actual painful experience, bringing in ill health, nervousness, anxiety, premature aging, disgust, and so on and so forth. But going more back to the ego and consciousness, then, we find that, I think of someone maybe perhaps grandfatherly, calm, accepting, never getting excited about something. But this razor's edge then between the human ego's compulsion for the next relationship, the next ice cream cone, whatever it is, it's always something to have more stimulation, the next latte even, although lattes are an exception, I think. But I've always taken great inspiration in the fact that Swamiji and I would enjoy a good cup of espresso while the others were having herb tea, and we would snicker at one another over their incapacity. But in any case, but this is deeply rooted in our nature. And therefore, we have this strong thought form, wrong understanding, that this excitement is what gives us life. Okay? That makes us happy. That makes life worth living. The irony is that based on the foundation stone of inwardness, niyama, the foundation of inner calmness, the irony is that our capacity for enjoyment is actually expanded exponentially, because the law of duality governs the stimulation of the five senses, the stimulation of imagination, fantasies, obsessions, all of which by the pendulum of duality kick us in the you-know-what, with regrets, with self-loathing, and all of the opposites. But based on calmness, when we enjoy our favorite pistachio ice cream or our espresso, we can learn to enjoy it with the joy of the self, with the joy of God. Because these things there, rightly appreciated, rightly engaged in appropriately in our life, can feed the fire of self-understanding, of right understanding. But this, like so much of, like Padma mentioned in the very beginning, and we talked about last week, this is where Patanjali has to be experienced. Yoga has to be experienced. We've gone through the Sankhya insight. We know it doesn't work. We know excitement has produced, obesity. Excitement has produced all sorts of problems, either for us or for those around us, or on some level we intuitively get it. And so we begin to reach within and find that calmness. But it's the ego and the subconscious that worries us about whether a life of calmness will bring us death, essentially, will make us a no thing. But it is a lie, and the lives of the saints. This is also why the study of the lives of the saints and attunement and the guru and so on can show us. Master would enjoy those mangoes, but as Swami said, you looked into his eyes and it was transcendent of that, even as he enjoyed. He cried he wept over the death of a loved one or what have you. But nonetheless, that other part remained. That I've always thought about that story where Swami says that after he was forcibly evicted from self-realization and wandered really in the desert of self-doubt for a period of time, when he began to get on his feet with a little bit of confidence and would do a few public things and sing or chant and so forth, more than one, people would come up and say they felt such joy, and he thought to himself, I don't feel any joy. How can they feel joy? And then when he introspected on it, he realized that joy, that level of inner joy was there. And I know that there's a number of you in this room who can attest to the same experience in the throes of even our physical suffering or our mental suffering, which, let's face it, is worse. There is still a touchstone, a lodestar. If we have come to the practice of yoga, we know that transcendent joy remains there. But we have to work at that nonetheless. Let's move back then to vrittis. I'm thinking of Nivritti. She's sitting right there, and every time I say Vritti, I think, well, there she is. She's a Nivritti. She got a good name. You got to admit, she's shining here tonight. I really enjoy Swami's quote definition of vrittis. It's very useful. He says, vrittis are self-developed inclinations, desires, and attachments. And all of the vrittis, now here we get into a little bit of heavy stuff. All of the vrittis are essentially delusory, but some are less delusory than others. Right understanding leads us towards sattva guna. Okay? Right understanding uplifts us into enlightenment, into a greater awareness. But my idea about being calm that we just discussed is no substitute for living it. Okay? It's still an idea. It might be a right idea. Yes, we should love rather than hate. But in fact, do I always respond with love and something maybe short of hate, but irritation at least? Well, I'm not sure I can say that yet. But do you see the difference? It's still just an idea. And those who live primarily in the mind are especially prone to the thought, I know I've spent most of my life imagining things were done simply because I could imagine they were done, only to be reminded by Padma with the to-do list that in fact they weren't done. They're still on the honey-do list. And so, and the same thing with the bhaktis. The bhaktis can delude themselves in feeling great devotion over looking at Krishna or something or chanting, thinking that they're therefore great bhaktis, when in fact all you got to do is look at them cross-eyed and they won't talk to you. And so you see, just because you have the emotion, in the case of feeling now, just because you feel upliftment, you go on retreat or you have a nice meditation. I can so think of several week-long seclusions. I came out thinking I had, whatever I thought anyway. And I remember one time, got home from this great seclusion and I got a phone call. And I lost it. I just punched the sucker right on the phone, so to speak. Because you think, this is what happened to Yudhishthira in gambling away the kingdom. You come to this chakra of deep calmness, and you're on top of the world, literally. This is the chakra that's on top of the world. Okay? And you think you've got it, because it's all in the mind. I could, what's the difference? I can go and, do this again. Like the alcoholic who wanders into a bar thinking he's over it, and pretty soon he's under it. And so calmness brings to us the delusion that we're free when we might not be. Okay? This is the problem of the mind, especially. That state of calmness is so uplifted and you feel so good. But it ain't over till somebody sings. So, anyway, so vrittis include all mentation, all mental activity is a vritti. The ones that get us in trouble are, of course, the vrittis with the energy of like and dislike. But as we grow spiritually, and as we walk the Eightfold Path and begin experiencing some of the higher states, hearing the Om, seeing the spiritual eye, having wisdom insights, being very peaceful under difficult circumstances, what was I going to say? Oh, the citta becomes more and more subtle. It's like, I'm not your crow. Remember that story where the yogi was disciplined? His meditation was disturbed and he looked up at the crow and burned him to pieces just by one look because he disturbed his meditation, and then he got his comeuppance and because he was told to go to these different untouchable people, and this one woman, a lowly housewife, made him wait at the door. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but it's a really good story. And she said, I'm not your crow. She obviously knew, you see. And so all mental activity is still not transcendence. I mentioned in the talk, I guess it was at Spiritual Renewal Week, it comes out of the Patanjali lecture transcriptions. Yogananda says that until you can sit for 1 hour without one whisper of thought, you are not really meditating. That's pretty discouraging. In fact, that's more than pretty discouraging. But this is what we have. Right understanding of meditation means we should approach every meditation with the desire, and the intention to achieve mental freedom, mental quietness. Every meditation, that's partly what Krishna means when he says even a little bit of this inward practice will save you. Even a little taste of breathlessness, quietness of mind will bring us back to meditation and will free us by constant practice. So a vritti includes our ideas, includes our imagination, includes the memories that come to us. And many of those don't come highly charged in the sense of, I like ice cream or I don't like ice cream, and the likes and dislikes. But my point here is all of those things are subtle. Why do certain memories come to you? Because they relate to ahankar. They relate to your ego. There's still a charge there. There's still there's a connection there. So all mental activity relate to the vrittis, whether they're and all of them therefore reflect the gunas. All of them, there can be, very low memories, but there can also be memories of a great meditation that come to you in meditation. Seems harmless enough, but it's still mental activity. That's what Patanjali is talking about. All of the vrittis are a commitment of our life force to some kind of constraint in time or place or objects. I was meditating out on the lawn. I remember this one, I'll never forget it, always is wonderful, but one of my first experiences at Ananda village was out under the stars at Spiritual Renewal Week at the old retreat when Swami be the banquet night, and we'd stuff ourselves on this wonderful banquet, and then he'd give a discourse under the stars. It was always a highlight of the whole week, Saturday night. And I remember I was just really stuffed. But I was just like he said, because this is the same story he gave as Days of Mount Washington in the Path. That's partly why I remember it. But it was such a beautiful night. Everyone, after a week of meditation in these classes with Swami and stuff, we were just so uplifted. And I think of that experience from time to time. But it's still just a stupid memory. It isn't the actual experience, unless it can transport me into that experience, which is well worth the transport, of course. That's why we use creative visualizations, because they can transport us. That's why we chant, because it can transport us. But we have to go beyond the chanting. We have to go beyond the visualization, beyond the memory. Do you see what Patanjali is trying to say? They're all vrittis. Some are better than others, like those ideas that Prem Shanti talks about. Of Larry's. And that's also why, right in the beginning of the sutras, he gets right into samadhi. It's sort of, oh my God, samadhi? We have to talk about that. Because what is the end of the vrittis? It is samadhi, you see? We have to know where we're going. We have to know what's there. In my life of meditation, I have struggled, and it's just constantly a struggle. Do I want to achieve no vrittis, nothing? I always worry about, well, if I go there, will I be, I don't know, possessed by a demon? I don't really worry about that. I'm happy to meet one. But in other words, is it really nothing, or should I feel bhakti? And do you remember what Master was told by Bhadhuri Mohashai? I just love this. He said, you go often into the silence, but have you achieved anubhava? Meaning love for God? Don't mistake the practice of meditation for the goal. How often do we have wrong understanding? And at the same time, this is why you just have to go there. You can talk about it all day, but at the same time, we have to still the vrittis. And we do have to enter the silence. I remember one time many years ago at Camp Brotherhood, we do these silent retreats. I was really trying to get this silent stuff, okay? And it was like a volcano. Perfect silence, I realized, isn't nothing. It can just snuff you out. It's so filled with energy and light, and what silence is that stupid stuff between the ears. The vrittis is what calms down. But it's not a no thing. I mean, yes, there can, like Rajasi and other great saints have talked about. He talked about how on the verge of samadhi, the whole world just collapsed and just disappeared. The light or the presence of Master or whatever you want to call it, it was gone. That's what the Buddha went through. So sure, you have to face the darkness. I don't mean that stupid stuff that's between the ears. I mean the real darkness of nothing. But it's nothing. What really comes into that is everything we want. All of these steps we have to go through. There's no way of getting around of it. There's two ways to God. Destroy the ego, that's the inner path, or expand the ego. But in the end, it doesn't make any difference. Some of us have more monastic samskars, and so we want to rid ourselves of the ego. Others, perhaps more creative, artistic perhaps, that's just an invention, that's just a vritti, expand. Swamiji very much represented that expansion of consciousness. Our path very much represents Dwapara, the expansion of energy. The monastic Kali Yuga samskars of destruction of ego is the negative path. I remember Swami talking about the children in Fatima and how one of them, I forget all their names, expressed the one path, which is weeping for God for the fact that the world is indifferent to God's love, and the other one wants to serve God. You can't get around those things. Those are just your individual paths. You can't say your path is better than the other. But these things you have to leave behind. But the struggle that I think everyone has to face in their own way, and I'm just describing my one, is you get to the door and you want to knock on the door and all these doubts assail you. Am I going through the wrong door? Should I be doing something different in meditation? It's just vrittis. It's just trying to pull you back. You just have to kick the damn door down. You just have to walk through it. I don't care what door it is. It's silence, it's nothing, it's love, it's expansion. Doesn't matter. That's why there's 8 aspects of it. But the vrittis is what we have to relax. Swami's expression in the book Awakening the Superconsciousness is that transcendent superconsciousness is the path of upward relaxation. Isn't that a beautiful way to put it? Because it's always the razor's edge with that. So I'm going to skip the samadhi part, but I want to finish with this thought, which is, what if your issue is that you tend to be passive? And so you look at yoga's chitta vritti nirod, ego transcendence, as an excuse to be passive. So, yeah, I'm really peaceful, man. We hippies were really good at that, Yeah, it's cool. That's not what we're talking about, okay? The interesting thing is, it's very interesting, the first chakra of the 8 aspects is peace. Yeah, man, this is cool. That's why in all the advertisements she sits there looking beautiful and, peaceful, I'm so peaceful. Because that's the first stage. Because you stop activity and of course you feel peaceful. Get over it. Because you do get over it. Because think of the fire element. We have to light a match. We can't just sit in our lovely meditation. Oh, I'm feeling so good. Yes, it's wonderful. This is so cool. And I see a lot of people, that's why they meditate. They're just meditating, like this, But you're not going to get to God. You're just enjoying yourself. Like that guy on the couch. What was his name? Bernard Shaw or somebody? What are you enjoying? Well, that's all I am enjoying is myself. And so we need the fire element in order to progress spiritually. And so don't mistake the spiritual path for passivity. Ego transcendence, for not taking responsibility, for being creative. And this is what Swami's great contribution, because this is our path. Our path is to say yes to life, to take responsibility, not to worry about the ego involvement. That's all you got, as Swami used to tell us. Fine, use the ego. Better to do something from ego than to do nothing. Do you see the difference? We can't get out of it, Krishna says, by not acting. What we do, we don't focus on ego. Yoga's chitta vritti nirod is not about ego transcendence per se. It's about right action, nishkam karma. What we do with the vrittis, desires, attachments, and inclinations, is refine them. We perfect them. With bhakti, we develop devotion rather than likes and dislikes. With jnana, we don't so much develop our intellect as our ability to receive the truth, which shall make us free to be still. With karma yoga, we don't so much work for self-involvement or ego aggrandizement as much as to work to serve God, to work as an act of devotion. It's by calming the vrittis that we come to the final issue in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, but also in the chakras. The ego is the last barrier to freedom. We don't fight the ego out front necessarily. We fight it indirectly through the 33 ego transcendent things of how we behave, learn to behave. Ego transcendence is the last frontier. It's the ego that we work with to convert from a foe to a friend. But in the end, like Moses, who couldn't enter the promised land because he represented symbolically ego, he was born in the captivity. In the end, on the causal plane, on the astral plane to the causal plane, we surrender the ego. But that's the last battle, not the first. It's refining our feelings, our actions, and our thoughts away from self-involvement to a greater reality that we calm the chitta. We calm the vrittis and the chitta associated with those vrittis according to their level here. It's a very subtle path, the Eightfold Path that we work on. And thus it is in our Dwapara expression of the new dispensation. This is why we follow the Gita. We take action. and we refine that action. And then in the end, I will make good your deficiencies and render permanent your gains, Krishna says and promises to us.
So we got through a few sutras tonight, and Riemann and I tried to answer the few questions that did come through the various things we said tonight. And next week, hopefully some of you will actually be able to meditate on what you're reading and think of any questions that come to mind and submit them. And then we will read them. Morley will read them and Riemann will respond. But for tonight, it's an exception.
Kriya meditation next week.
Oh, next week's Kriya meditation. The next time we meet, whatever that is, according to the schedule that I gave you,
Right.
that will happen. But tonight, we promised those who... How many of you were not here the opening night and weren't able to take your vows? We promised that we would give that opportunity tonight, so we'd like to end in these last 10 minutes or so by doing the vows, if we can restructure here. Can a couple of you guys help to take the harmonium and